If part one was about establishing what happened on Everest in 1996, then part two is about what happened afterward, when the mountain receded and the stories began. This is the point at which raw events turned into narrative, memories hardened into interpretation, and one account, Jon Krakauer's, came to dominate public understanding of the disaster. The goal here is not to tear that account apart for sport, but to understand where it holds, where it bends, and where it breaks under closer scrutiny. Michael Tracy is a YouTuber. He is also a climber. He summited Mount Everest. He has a channel on YouTube. I will be sure to put the link in the description of this video. And he makes a great point. The issue with Krakauer's book isn't about what Krakauer did on the mountain while he was in 1996 Mount Everest in Rob Hall's expedition. It looks at how he interpreted that story once he was home, once his mind was back to normal. How was he still repeating stories that were debunked by everybody else who was on that expedition? Jon Krakauer's Into Thin Ice became the definitive version because it arrived first and because it was written with extraordinary narrative force. Krakauer is a gifted writer, no doubt about it, and he had a national platform, and he offered readers something they rarely get, a disaster book told from the inside by someone who survived it. The book framed the tragedy as a cautionary tale about the commercialization of Everest. And for many readers, that explanation felt not only plausible, but morally satisfying. It provided causes, consequences, and identifiable failures in a situation that otherwise seemed terrifyingly random. But the authority of a narrative does not guarantee its accuracy, especially when that narrative is built under conditions of trauma and oxygen deprivation. High-altitude climbers have long acknowledged that memory in the death zone is unreliable, and yet that's exactly what Krakauer's book is based on. And that's not just Krakauer. Even the people who tell their story and tell it differently than he does, even they're relying on their own memories while they were in the death zone. So it's a universal thing. But there are some cases where everybody who was there aligns on one side. And then you will see that Krakauer's version of the events are completely different. Now, part of that is the medium, right? So if you're giving an interview, you're asking direct questions and you're giving direct answers. In Jon Krakauer's case, he was writing a novel. And so it's not like it's a question and answer. He's writing a novel. He's not writing a report. And part of it is that he is at heart an author, not a journalist. So I think that instinctively he looks to create a story. He looks to create an arc. And so the issue is that from time to time, people felt that Jon Krakauer would steer the story to fit with his theme, which is that the commercialization and the overcrowding was the problem. When in actuality, there were other more concrete reasons. A didn't happen because B didn't happen. Whereas Krakauer wanted everything to be about the overcrowding and the commercialization. He was telling a story, he was telling a narrative. Now, I have 3 clips that I want to go through and explain what Krakauer's, I'm going to show the clips from Into Thin Air, the made-for-TV movie, and that is essentially Krakauer's version of events. And then I will go through for each one and give the real things that everybody else said happened. One thing that I will say in Krakauer's defense, he was in a bit of a no-win situation because once people had died on the mountain, any story that he told, if he had assigned blame to any of the people who were no longer with us, he was going to automatically get the criticism of, well, you're attacking a dead man. And in some cases, if he assigned blame to one of the people that didn't live through the tragedy, then he was going to be accused of being inaccurate. So I will give him credit that he did have that obstacle to overcome. Now, one of the people that John clearly had a personality conflict with was Anatoly Bukharev, who was one of the guides for Scott Fischer's Mountain Madness team.
Where the hell you been? Sleeping? You slept in? It happens, Scott. Not when you're working for me. It doesn't happen. When you're supposed to be guiding. Scott, don't Scott me. You're a screw-up and a royal pain in the ass. No, I'm paying you to work. You understand work? Or is that word non-existent in Russia?
I already told you, I'm not from Russia. I'm from Republic of Kazakhstan.
You're from nowhere, Anatoly. And you're never gonna work for me again.
You don't mean this, Scott. It's the altitude.
Throughout most of the book, Anatoly really is kind of like the big bad boogeyman. He was a Kazakhstan climber, and he was a guide with, as I said, Scott Fischer's Mountain Madness. In Krakauer's account, Bukharev is portrayed as reckless and irresponsible. He's criticized for climbing without supplemental oxygen, for descending ahead of the clients, and for failing to conform to what Krakauer understood as proper guiding practices. This portrayal had serious ramifications for Bukharev's reputation, particularly in Western climbing circles. In response, Bukharev co-authored a book entitled The Climb, in which he directly challenged Krakauer's interpretations of events and defended his own actions. Now, one thing, John Krakauer was taking Anatoly's behavior and actions, and he was comparing it to the behavior of the guides on Rob Hall's team. The problem is that Anatoly wasn't on Rob Hall's team. And he wasn't, and Krakauer wasn't his client. Anatoly was on the other team. And how Scott Fischer chose to run his team and the rules he had and the expectations he had are things that John Krakauer just wasn't privy to. So how can he turn around then and say, well, Anatoly was doing it wrong? Nobody but Scott and Anatoly knew what they had agreed upon between themselves. The main thing that there was the complaint against Anatoly was that he chose to climb to the summit without oxygen. And what that meant is he essentially was, in their heads, volunteering to weaken himself when he was in charge of other people's lives. But the thing is, Anatoly wasn't doing it to kind of like be, all machismo and I can do it. It's because he felt that that actually put him at a disadvantage if he did use oxygen. Think of it whereas the oxygen was preventing your body from feeling the effects of the higher altitude. So if by some chance you then run out of oxygen, you become essentially useless because your body has been tricked into not realizing the situation it was in by the supplemental oxygen. You're kind of not letting your body acclimatize to the lack of oxygen at the higher altitudes. But when you do summit without the oxygen, when you return back to the camp and get additional oxygen, you actually then go ahead and turn around and put yourself at an advantage. It has rejuvenation in a sense, in that it gives you renewed energy. And because Anatoly got back to the camp quickly, took on some oxygen, he was then able to go out into the storm and rescue 3 people because he had that power reserve, that energy reserve that he wouldn't have had he used oxygen on his way to the summit. Meanwhile, at that same time, John Krakauer was sitting in his tent curled into the fetal position because of, and I'm not throwing shade on him, it's just that he was suffering from the effects of the lack of oxygen at higher altitudes. Anatoly was able to avoid that. Now, the next person that John kind of has it in for is Sandy Hill Pittman. And the way he describes her, he almost gives her the characterization as though Carrie Bradshaw decided it looked like a good day to hike to the top of Mount Everest. He didn't feel that she was taking it very seriously, and he felt that she was draining resources that the team couldn't afford drained.
Looking strong, Andy. Peaking at the right time.
Yeah, no worries. I actually think we're going to knock this big bastard off.
don't look very happy.
You run your crew as you see fit.
And here comes the but.
But Lopsang cannot perform and carry 80 pounds of sandy shipment here.
Says he can.
If it's anything you want to hear, Scott, you're his hero.
What do you want me to do, huh? I've got a paying client who's got a job to do. She needs the equipment.
It's dangerous.
I know what I'm doing.
Do you?
Yeah,
What happens if Lopsang folds? What happens if he can't fix the ropes?
it's not gonna happen.
Look, I'm telling you, mate, dump the blasted equipment.
Can't.
Can't or won't.
Couple problems with this. For one thing, Sandy Hill Pittman, she too was a journalist, and she was reporting back with daily updates through satellite phones and communicating directly with, I think it was CBS at the time. And so she was there doing a job the same way that John Krakauer was. And as a part of that, she hired extra Sherpas. So there was no draining of the group's resources to carry her equipment up. She paid people to do just that, to bring just her equipment up. And the other issue is that Sandy had infinitely more experience, especially at high altitude climbing, than John Krakauer himself did. This was in fact her third trip to Everest. The first two times, weather had stopped her actual ascent all the way to the summit. So for John Krakauer, I mean, this was her third trip. She'd done this twice before. And yet here's Krakauer here for the first time criticizing her as the novice. It's almost surreal. And that brings me to the third person. Now, there is amongst mountaineers, amongst climbers, a challenge called the Seven Summits Quest. And what it is that they attempt to get to the tallest point on all 7 continents. Now, there was a woman on Rob Hall's team, the Adventure Consultants, by the name of Yasko Namba, and she was on her 7th summit, meaning she had already obtained the 6 other ones. And this is how John Krakauer treats her or characterizes her in the book.
Wait until I make it the line and I'm ready.
Ready.
Yasko, you were supposed to wait. Fatherman, I've got her. Okay. I told her to wait until the rope was anchored.
So here you had again someone with significantly more experience than John Krakauer, again a woman, which is the accusation is that he's very chauvinistic, and here she is on her 7th summit, and he characterizes her in the book as though she is a novice. And it's just ridiculous because she had more experience than he did. Now, to make this worse, that event that was in that scene, it never happened. Yasko was on Rob Hall's Adventure Consultants team. The person who was attaching the ropes and climbing the ladder, that was Neil Beidelman from Mountain Madness. Now, Neil Beidelman has come out and said that never happened. And Yasko Namba, unfortunately, she was one of the ones that died on Everest, and so she can't come out and defend herself. But here, he's not only attacking a dead woman, he's attacking one with more experience than him and thoroughly demeaning her. So it's not really a shock that once Krakauer's book was published, none of the people who are still alive and who could read it were real happy with him. When people say Into Thin Air has been debunked, they often mean that specific claims have been corrected or contested. Now, there are 2 YouTube channels that I've watched that have a lot of this information. One is Michael Tracy, and the other one is Adventures Gone Wrong. I will link them both in the description because they're great channels. And if you are interested in this at all, If it's not there, nobody knows it. I mean, they are very, very thorough researchers. They do a wonderful job. Krakauer's portrayal of Bukharev was widely viewed as unfair. Some sequences of the events are inaccurate. Certain causal claims are overstated. The only thing that is remaining intact is the core idea of what happened on the expedition. Climbers died, structural pressures existed, and the commercialization of Everest introduced risks that were not fully acknowledged or controlled. The lasting importance of Into Thin Air lies not in its precision, but in what it reveals about human behavior under extreme conditions. It shows how people make decisions when their bodies are failing, how organizations function under pressure, and how survivors construct meaning from catastrophe. It is not a definitive historical record, but it is a powerful study in narrative truth, guilt, and the limits of memory. Ultimately, the book should be read not as the final word on the 1996 Everest disaster, but as one voice among many. When read alongside other accounts, it becomes more honest, not less. The mountain itself does not care about stories, but we do, because stories are how we try to understand events that resist easy explanation. Into Thin Air endures because it captures that struggle, even when it stumbles in the telling. So I hope that you did enjoy this video as a bit of a change of pace. And I'm always open to suggestions. So if you have a book like this that you think would be good to do a video on, just let me know by leaving your thoughts down in the comments. Now, one stories or series that I would love to do is the Outlander series. I was a fan of Outlander before anybody else knew about it. I was in, AOL chats talking about it long before anybody knew about it. But the problem that I have is that I don't know how to cover it. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, right now I'm leaning towards just doing book 1. But again, I'm open to suggestions. So if you have any, go ahead and drop that in the comments. Before you leave, please be sure to hit that like button. It does make a huge difference for the channel. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you have a great day.